Alright guys, so this is installment number 3 in the series of what in my opinion are the best muscle building exercises. Feel free to watch just this video. I've already done one for quads and for chest. If you're interested in that, go ahead and check those out as well too. And I recommend having a full video on what I think are the best principles behind which to either build exercises or determine what are the best muscle building exercises. But the really quick recap is that, again, if we're just picking one, I'm giving an example of obviously 2 great exercises here. This doesn't mean you couldn't do 5 or 6 exercises in a workout or in your training split or in the week or whatever, just depending on your goals and where you're at. This is kind of where, how do you prioritize or how do you pick what are your big or best movements that hopefully you can get the most out of if you're doing right. And the principles that I like to build those behind are one, and I kind of skip this one sometimes. You wanted something that trains the muscle through a relatively large range of motion with appropriate challenge at that range, and that gets to the profile, which I'll talk about in a minute. So meaning something could be a pretty good exercise, but if it's a curl that only trains 50% of the range, if I can find something that also appropriately challenges a range but goes through 80% of that muscle's contractile range, I'd rather pick that. In addition with that, I've covered this in more detail. You can make the argument just because of how much force a muscle can actually produce. And again, force, and as we speak with muscles, equates to tension. The more tension a muscle produces, you could argue, is going to be the thing that leads to the signaling that could set up arguably the most hypertrophy if your recovery is on point. So again, that tends to happen where muscles are in their mid and lengthened ranges, where it's been shown from a physiological standpoint, muscles are extremely weak in the fully shortened position. So I'm always going to bias the most muscle building exercises or mass building exercises towards ones that load or train the muscle through their lengthened and mid ranges. So aside from that, the parameters that you want something that aligns well, meaning it's going to go where it's intended as far as aligning with the fibers of the muscle, and also isn't going to wreck your joints along the way. You want something as well that is braced, so meaning other stuff isn't going to give way, other stuff doesn't have to excessively stabilize to get as much as the load you're using to the intended or the targeted muscle. And then you want something that's a good profile. And what profile means is, it's great to train a muscle through, to use it through 90% of its range, but if only half of that range is actually with a load that's appropriate, the rest of the range of motion, you're essentially under-training it. Profiles get a little bit complicated, but that's the short version, meaning you want to make sure, okay, well, if I'm training it through this range, it's also with a load that's appropriate. So as always, you can skip this whole mess if you want. You can go right to the exercises that I'm going to give, and it's going to be, the video and audio of what I think are the best. But the 2 top exercises, I honestly have no idea what order to put this in. I'll probably put it, the first one I'm going to go with is actually the leg press. The reason the leg press is hard to beat is it's one of the exercises that the other 2, there's a bunch of them. Obviously you could do, I'll get into those, but it's one of the best exercises that makes it easiest to load the glute in the fully lengthened range. So to get in whatever your available full hip flexion is when your knee is in a bent position. If you have your knee straight, you're going to run out of range on some side of the joint. We'll just say hamstrings for now. You're going to run out of range with your hamstrings before your glutes get fully lengthened. So your knee has to be bent or has to be flexed if you want to get fancy, if you want to get that want to get that glute to a fully lengthened position. So leg press for most people is the easiest place to get your glutes to a fully lengthened position. In addition, it's really easy to adjust your foot stance and foot position, so it's going to be good alignment for your knees. It's going to be good alignment for getting everything to your glute muscles. And 3, probably the top advantage that it has is bracing. So meaning because your hips, your lower back, and everything are pressed hard back into that back pad, it's pretty much only lower body working, meaning your lower back's not going to give out. You don't have to stabilize your hips as much, which is why, why would I pick leg press over a squat? Because you could say that a squat would also get your glutes, depending on how you squat, can get your glutes to a fully lengthened position, has a similar profile as far as how it loads the muscle. But the big advantage to leg press over squats is going to be bracing. You have as much variability as far as with foot position and things like that to kind of determine, hopefully you're putting more of it on your glutes, than you are your quads or even your hams or adductors. But the advantage here is if you've got a bar on your back, everything along your spine has to work just to stabilize and hold that in place. where it's very, very common when people squat heavy, if the goal is to use as much load as you can to get to your lower body, their lower back, their hips, their torso starts to fatigue sometimes before their glutes. Now, again, of course, I'm not saying squats aren't a good exercise. They are a great exercise. If I had to pick my top 5, I'd probably put them in there somewhere. But I'm just saying I'm going to give the little edge or the little notch to the leg press because of bracing, because it's just, you can get in, if you lock yourself in place properly, train through your appropriate ranges, you can just get in and blast and work. So it allows you to use way more load. And so for glutes, this is two reasons I think glutes are great. People put a little bit too much emphasis on fiber typing, in my opinion, but I think there is something to it, especially for certain muscles. Very large muscles, I think, need a broad spectrum of rep range to train. So meaning glutes, to have the biggest, most developed glutes you can, you need lower rep range, so I'd argue down, sometimes as low as 5 or 6. And you need the kitchen sink rep range, throwing everything at them. So I think glutes are a muscle that respond very well to high reps, drop sets, strip sets. The leg press is a great place to do both. You can go extremely heavy without having to worry about, again, as much stabilizing stuff in the way hurting. And it's arguably just as important when you're 20, 30, 50 reps deep in a set. If you're loading your back is going to be done way, most people way done before your hips and your lower body musculature. So that's why I would pick leg press as arguably my top exercise. As you see the videos, I'll give you some form cues. The biggest disadvantage or biggest challenge, one of things to be aware of, it only loads the glutes through their fully lengthened and through their mid-range. You're probably missing arguably 30 to 40% of their full contractile range, which we'll get to with the next exercise. And 2 is because of the nature of a leg press, which is arguably a true closed chain exercise, and meaning any joint that's moving can do work. So form and execution are massive because it's very, very easy to get in. And if you're just working as hard as you can, not really thinking about where is it going, lots of times your quads can do the work, your calves can even do the work, hamstrings and adductors can do the work. So some of the best cues are you really need to feel the glutes lowering the weight. Lots of times you need to find a muscle in the eccentric first when you're lowering it. And then out of the bottom, you want to try and squeeze your glutes first and then contract as hard as you can. Now, this doesn't mean use lightweight. It means if you feel your quads and everything else first, maybe use lightweight so you can practice that. But ultimately, the advantage of the exercise is the amount of load you can use. So you want to go heavy. And a big cue I give people too as well is when you're in the leg press, as opposed to pushing your feet into the platform and thinking up, think about driving your thigh, like the back of your leg, towards the ground, or depending on the angle of the leg press, forward, and then finishing with driving your thigh into the ground. That's one of the simple but best cues. If you apply that, you're thinking about the glute can only move your leg. It can't extend your knee. So if you're not focused on the platform, you're not focused on extending the knee, you're focused on what your thigh is doing, that will help you keep more on your glutes and less on your quads. So that is my number 1 pick for glute exercises. I joke it's not the most sexy of exercises, so you won't see a whole lot of booty trainers, Insta models, whatever you want to call them, who build their entire business around bands and jumping around. Hey, there's a place for bands. I use them all the time. You're going to see that in the next exercise. But I think the main reason people don't advertise leg press for being a better exercise is Insta models, or people sometimes whose fan base or following is built on the way their glutes look. They're sitting on them during that exercise. So you can't see the main attraction or the main advertising point for their site, sometimes for their entire business. So again, that'd be my top pick. Number 2 is going to be Banded Rdls or Banded Rack Rdls. This is an exercise. All these exercises should go without saying for guys and girls are great options. I had a hard time finding a video of a guy doing this for some reason, but I've done them all the time. The funny thing is the reason I don't do these exercises more myself is my glutes actually get too big too fast, and I think they're that effective. So if you're trying to get your ass as big as possible, as soon as possible, and again, that should be for girls and guys equal, in my opinion. Nobody likes a flat pancake ass dude where your jeans just fall off your ass and you got flapjacks and loose skin hanging back there. Dude, I'm not attracted to men, but even that grosses me out. If I was going to be attracted to men, it'd be even fucking worse if I saw that. Ladies don't want to deal with that, guys. I'm going to give you this. Like, girls might not know about that. So if you're in high school and watching this, girls might not care. They might care about your chest and your biceps and your abs. But ladies, women, they care about your ass. Basically, sometimes they just get stuck with a guy. They get advanced far enough in the relationship, the pants come off, and you're like, fuck, I really like this guy for his personality and everything else, but that ass is disgusting. And they just tolerate it for the rest of the relationship. That's a big sidebar, but that's a rant for guys that don't train their lower body and are infamous for not training glutes. But same for girls. Most guys, we like glutes. We like as much muscle. Personally, I like as much muscle and as much fat back there as possible. It's the combination that's very important. But again, these are side rants that no one probably cares about. Sorry about all that. So my next one, why banded RDLs? So the benefit of an RDL, stiff leg, or I kind of like a soft bend on the knee assist as well too. So again, if you bend the knee a little bit going through this motion, I think it can actually help bias your glutes more, where if you truly keep a stiff knee or fully extended knee, you're really biasing the hamstrings to work. The band helps counteract that because using the band and coming to a fully extended hip position, only your glutes can really contract. I won't say only, but your hamstrings are really, really disadvantaged in that position. So by keeping tension on in a fully extended hip position, that's the real point of the band. It really allows your glutes to do a lot more work, really biases them to work more than the hamstrings, which is going to be the goal, obviously, if you're glute training. So again, why the band? So first off, the downside of this exercise is it probably misses the last 20 degrees-ish or 20% of the glutes full contractile range going into full hip flexion, but that's okay. That's what the leg press is for. But the band allows you to create and keep tension when you're in a fully extended hip position, which again, you don't get with a traditional RDL. When the only load is the bar pulling you straight down, basically when you come all the way to a fully extended hip position, when your hips are stacked, the weight's stacked very close to your hips, there's little to no tension there. So the band allows you to contract with that full range and keep load the whole time. Alignment is great. Once you kind of get set up and good to go, it's a very easy exercise to keep where you want, and not anything else. You can adjust the foot. I adjust, for most people, a slightly wider stance, feet, and not really the feet, it's more the hips, but the feet will tell you the story. Feet and hips slightly externally rotated. That also helps you bias the glutes, arguably get them a little bit shorter, a little bit more fully contracted. So good variability for alignment. Good profile because it's heaviest at the bottom, lighter at the top because you're pretty much handling the band weight, but still keeping tension there, so it's not completely to zero. So I would say it's a very good profile for the range of training. The only knock on this exercise is bracing, meaning you are transferring all the load through your spine, which again, loading the back, loading the spine, in my opinion, are not bad. You just need to practice and get those muscles strong enough as well too, so they're not the fatiguing factor. So again, why the band and not just standard? Well, one, like I said, it keeps tension at the top, and also by keeping tension in a fully extended hip position, it really allows your glutes to jump in and get involved in the exercise and not just make it a hamstring or an adductor exercise. And secondly, it doesn't take away from the loads. You can use it all. So again, I've found with people, if you can do RDLs with 400 pounds, you can do RDLs with 400 pounds in a band. And there's a lot of reasons for this. One, you're just not loading the top for the most part. The bands do little to nothing at the bottom, so they're not really adding load where you don't need more added depending if you set them up right. You just want the band relatively loose when you're fully hip flexed. But also, I find it really helps with cueing and really helps people do the exercise better. You know, when you're doing an RDL, you don't want to think up and down with the barbell because it's very easy to use your lower back. Your lower back can flex and extend and move the barbell up and down. Instead, thinking back and forward with the hips can be one of the best cues to keep your glutes involved and your back out of it. And the band really helps and reinforces that. You kind of just feel your hips pull back with the band. You contract your glutes as hard as you can and flex them into the band. So that's the reason I love this exercise. It's one of the best exercises, I think, for loading the glutes fully shortened, which again, for most muscles, I would say isn't that important for muscle growth, with the exception of muscles that there's lots of other muscles that can do a very similar job. So again, you have external rotators, you have abductors, you have hamstrings, all that can extend the hip. Most of them don't have very good mechanical advantage when your hips are fully extended. That's where your glutes can work the most. So that's why I love this exercise so much. It loads them very heavy through the mid-range where they're very strong, you get a lot of tension, but also loads them through full extension, so you're helping the glutes work more. And again, as opposed to other stuff working. Now again, other stuff is always working. I'm not saying any of these isolate the glutes by a long shot, but the goal is to bias or use more of those muscles compared to the other stuff that can jump in. So that is as brief as I can keep it, which wasn't very brief at all, but hey, it is what it is. And up like all the other ones, I'll give you some demos of each of the exercises, starting with the leg press. So I'll give you some cues, but I also want you to pay attention to range of motion is a little bit different for everybody. You know, when you're on that leg press, stop before your hips move. Everybody wants to bury the shit into their chest. I've got plenty of females, which I'll show you, which can just take their legs outside of their body. If they've got it, great. I've had some guys with tremendous glute development, ridiculously strong, and their hip flexion just stops. It is what it is, you know, so don't force it. Really pay attention. If you bury your thighs into your chest and the last 20 degrees comes from your pelvis rotating up, that's your spine rounding under load. Not a good thing in my opinion, and that range of motion didn't come from your hips. I can't see anyone argue how range of motion coming from other than the joint that muscle moves is going to be a good thing for developing that muscle. It just doesn't make any sense. So listen to your range of motion. It's going to be different from person to person. I'd like to be able to do the splits and take them outside my body as much as the next guy, but it's not going to happen. And for the RDL variation, I have one extra video tagged on the end. I prefer the barbell RDL with the band because setup tends to be a little bit easier. People have the equipment a little bit more ready available. But on the end, I have one where it's basically a V squat or a power squat, whatever you want to call the machine, with a band across the hips as well too. I think it's pretty much the exact same exercise, arguably slightly better because you're not focusing on gripping a bar, which sometimes makes it easier for your upper body to do work. But the setup's not as easy. Not everyone has that piece of equipment. Not everybody has a place you can fix a band to behind the machine. But I wanted to show you, if you guys have access to this and you have that piece, have at it and use it. Because it's arguably, it's at least just as good, if not a slightly better option than the RDL. Again, the only knock is usability. So as always, hope you guys enjoy the videos. Hope the demos as well here help too. And obviously we're gonna get to every single body part eventually. So once these are all done, you guys are gonna be jacked. All right, guys, so first one here, I wanted to show a couple demos of Nikki, my client Nikki, doing this because of her crazy mobility. So first, when you're doing more glute dominant, as a general rule of thumb, you always want a very wide stance because that will let your thigh move outside of your body, which in general will always allow for more hip flexion. You just need to make sure that your knees track right in line with your toes. And then let your your thigh fall to the outside of your body. And as long as your hips and lower back don't move an inch, take it as low as you can. And like you can see here with Nikki, she can pretty easily take it outside of her body. So 2 different leg presses here, just to show you the same in both. And if you're looking as a coach, or if you're gauging on yourself, I'm looking right at the base of her hips, and they are not rolling or moving an inch. So more than the lower back, it's the pelvis you're trying to feel not moving, and as a result the lower back won't move as well. And then again, you want the knees falling outside of the body, wide high stance on the leg press. So if it was lower, it would promote a little bit more knee flexion and extension. A little bit higher keeps a little bit more hip flexion and extension. And you want to keep the load, if anywhere, through the heels and the outside of the feet. Now I gotta demo my ugly ass doing this. But similar thing, you can see I have a very, very wide stance, and you'll see because I'm trying to let my thigh go as far as I can outside of my body. And believe me, although not as pretty as Nikki, this is as absolutely far as I can go. If I take it any further down, my pelvis just completely rolls up. Even if you look back to when I just got in the machine, you can see how my pelvis is completely off until I pull it down and set it down in. And then as far as cues go here, whether on this leg press or a different one, here I'm focusing on driving my thigh towards the wall in this case. Slightly less vertical leg press. You can focus on driving your thigh to the ground. And that's my main focus, literally keeping my intent on keeping tension in my glutes the whole time and just trying to drive them hard in the direction of my thigh can go. So in this case, like towards the wall, or again on a normal leg press, more towards the ground. And then just want to demo 2 different paces here as well too. So Nikki's were a little bit slower controlled, mine a little bit quicker. And again, all depends on your execution. So now I want to show the Banded RDL version. And again, I want you to be aware of a couple different things here. One, guys absolutely do this as well too. I can generally RDL between 405, 455. Its strength is pretty good, and I can do the exact same thing with the band. So again, to set the band, just do something that's not going to move. In this case, I have the hooks that you would normally put a bar on, so I've got the band around there. That can be a very easy way to do it. You could just tie them around the poles, use some carabiners, whatever, anything that won't let it move. You want it about hip height. You want that band right in your hip crease. And then from there, you want to focus on driving the hips back and driving them forward. And I was starting to say too, if you're to use more weight, obviously you're using 300-400 pounds plus, your band will match the load. So again, if you're having heavier loads, you're going to need a bigger or a heavier band. I'm also having my wife demo this with racks, so the pins set in the bottom or the rack set in the bottom, and that's basically exactly where her end of range of motion is, where she runs out of hip flexion. So you can do that as an option as well too. You don't have to do those. You can just go back and forth, up and down. But as an added gauge, some people, I like to put that in there so they don't go any further. She could go lower with the bar, but eventually her hips would run out of range of motion and it would turn all into spinal flexion. So again, once you're all set up, you've got that figured out. Like I mentioned before, you want the feet wide-ish outside of shoulder width, legs externally rotated, so feet will be a little bit externally rotated. Thinking back and forward, not up and down, so driving your hips as far back as you can to the wall. Take note of her spine, pretty much unmoving. So she's not rounding at the bottom, she's not extending to finish. And from the bottom, I'm telling her to keep her glutes tight. She squeezes them first, and then hard contraction into that band. Instead of thinking up and down, you're just squeezing your glutes as hard as you can into that band. And you'll see she's not finishing with low back extension. And she's doing a pretty good job of keeping a neutral spine even at her neck. So I cue her all the time. You can see there at the bottom, lots of times she gets her head coming up a little bit. So the cue of keeping your head neutral, sometimes a chin tuck helps with that. And again, that's just in the ideal world. As far as pace, I always say keep controlled. So you obviously want very controlled eccentrics or negatives so you don't let gravity do the work. But from there, you can get aggressive with contractions. And I wanted to show this set as well, too, just something as a little added bonus for you. If you want to extend the set and make it brutal, particularly just on the glutes, then you can take it right into loading just the band. So here she's done with the weight, so there's no load at the bottom. So she's keeping essentially these partial ranges of motion just where there's tension, just at the top. And she's extending the set just where she's got some left in this kind of brutal range of motion and just at the top. So cue should always be drive the hips as far back as you can, squeeze the glutes first, hard contraction into that band. And again, this is just a nice little added way to extend a set if you feel like torturing yourself that way. So again, great option for everybody, guys, girls, whoever. You want some great glutes. Those are a couple main cues to focus on to get the job done. And like I said before, I wanted to show one other option. So this is essentially like a V squat. So whatever it is, it's a machine that can be intended to be used for squats or RDL variations. And now I've just got the band fixed to something behind her. I think it's a hack behind her, obviously somewhere it's going to unmove through the hip crease. And this client also just does a great job demoing of driving those hips back, glute squeeze, hard finish through from the glutes. And the big thing to look at here is, no motion again at the lower back. So whatever you're doing it on, you want the midsection brace. Nothing's relaxed. The lower back's tight. Internal and external obliques are tight. TVA, rectus abdominis, all braced, keeping that spine still and trying to keep all the crease and motion occurring at the hips. And exact same cues and things focus. She's got the feet externally rotated. More importantly, the thighs, the femurs externally rotated. And if anything, sometimes a little bit of a feel of trying to kind of corkscrew the feet into the ground, externally rotate the feet, externally rotate the femur, come into the top, can help get a little extra glute contraction as well too. And again, once you've got the pace, once you've got the control, you can get a little bit more aggressive and a little quicker with those contractions if you've got it. As always, if you guys like this, please feel free to comment below. Let me know. I will get to every single body part, don't worry. And if you like more detailed stuff like this is essentially the entire deal, hypertrophycoach.com. Aside from Q&A and interviews with other coaches and athletes, tips on workout design, volume, every question you could possibly ever ask. The big thing is workouts. So there's tons of info on there as far as every single body part, every single workout, everything you could ever want, all done like this. There's a setup, there's cues, there's execution, there's form tips. So again, obviously, if you're just into this kind of stuff, be sure to check it out. And I should mention it is always the dirt cheap $9.95 a month. No contracts, no nothing. So worst case scenario, you can always sign up for a month, steal all my shit, and then cancel. And I'm perfectly fine with that because there'll be new stuff coming every single month. So hope this helps, guys. If you enjoy it, let me know below, and I'm going to keep them coming.